I hope this video is useful. We will find out in a day whether or not this video was worth making in the first place. Hey y'all, it's Becky here from the Beckisphere, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Becky, and on the Beckisphere we talk about everything relating to the climate crisis. The problems, yes, but the solutions, yes. So if that sounds like something you would be interested in, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button below, click the like, comment on what topics you want to see relating to the climate. And well, today we are going to talk about the difference between the Biden climate plan and the Green New Deal. Before I get started, I need to let my cat in. Okay, now we can get started. Oh, do you want to leave now? Okay. You can't do that well with a cast, I'm just saying. Oh, okay. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that I want to mention when it comes to talking about the difference between Biden's climate plan and the Green New Deal is that by comparing the two, it's assuming that they are both on the same playing field, and that, for starters, is not the case. The Green New Deal was made as kind of a vague outline for what is recommended to be done about the climate. It had provisions that talked more about housing benefits and social justice and infrastructure in a way that deviated from the initial topic of the climate, arguing that other issues actually impact and are impacted by the climate issue. And while that does still stand, the Biden climate plan talks more specifically about things relating to the climate crisis. So it is also a more specific plan than the Green New Deal. So those are two things to keep in mind. One is that the Biden plan is more detailed and that the Biden plan is more specific to the topic of the climate. That being said, there are in fact a lot of similarities between the two, and Biden has been very upfront in his website and while talking about his plan that in fact the framework of the Biden climate plan was heavily influenced by the Green New Deal. In addition to that, the makers of the Green New Deal, such as members of the Sunrise Movement, U.S. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or AOC as she's called, and Bernie Sanders. All of them were a part of making Biden's plan once Biden was announced as the Democratic candidate. So that being said, there's a lot of similarities between those plans. But I want to again emphasize that Biden's plan has a lot more detail when it comes to what he is proposing, and part of that is shown in the budget. The Biden plan is estimated to cost about $2 trillion over a period of 4 years. The Green New Deal did not necessarily have a cost estimate, as it was more vague in its proposals, and so economists have estimated that it would cost tens of trillions of dollars, and that is a common argument for those who don't necessarily support the Green New Deal because it was seen as such an expensive endeavor. Now, for a little bit of context between what $2 trillion means in the US, in our early stimulus plan for the coronavirus was $2.2 trillion in this part of the year. And we're definitely, hopefully, going to spend a lot more money relating to the pandemic. But that gives a little more context to really how small $2 trillion is compared to other methods of spending. And that gets me to the next point, is some of the parts that Biden talks about in his plan. So some of the parallels that we are seeing between the Biden climate plan and the Green New Deal include things such as infrastructure. Infrastructure is a big aspect of both of those plans, as infrastructure in general needs help in the US. But the goal is to stimulate job growth by making current existing infrastructure be more sustainable and green, and building new infrastructure that follow higher sustainability standards. Biden promises in his plan that there will be a huge increase of jobs in the electric car market. In addition to that, he has specific guidelines for different points that he wants to hit in reducing our carbon footprint. One of which is that he wants to have zero carbon emissions for the electricity sector by 2035. And he wants to make the US carbon neutral by 2050. Now, these are not as ambitious as the Green New Deal, but they do present a more formulated approach within a 4-year period because, presidents can't ensure that they will be reelected after 4 years, and so he is being realistic with what he proposes. The Green New Deal was looking more at a 10-year period, which would be 2.5 presidential terms. So another aspect that the Green New Deal and Biden's plan were very similar on talked about social justice issues. Now, the Green New Deal did go further into issues having to do with social justice when it came to things like affordable housing and education and social justice reform. Because Biden is making it more focused on the climate in particular, he is referring to having to do with sustainable housing projects and providing 40% of those $2 trillion that he estimates will be used in the 4 years for his climate plan to go towards lower income and historically impacted areas for the climate. So those are some issues that the Biden plan and the Green New Deal agree on. Now, some issue that Biden's plan talks about that the Green New Deal doesn't seem to talk about includes different forms of energy sourcing, including nuclear energy. Biden's plan actually discusses that he would like to look and see what can the energy sector benefit from the nuclear reactors that are currently already in existence, and what further infrastructure needs to be built in order to properly account for how much nuclear power can move us towards a net zero carbon existence. So that is one element that he is talking about. He also discusses biofuel and talking about the agricultural system as it relates to producing its own form of energy and its impact on the environment, and talking with farmers and ranchers to make the agricultural industry more environmentally friendly and decrease its carbon impact, which is another video that I want to talk about in the future. So those are some elements that Biden's plan actually specifies more specifically than the Green New Deal did. So those are some of the main points that I wanted to talk about when it came to the Green New Deal and Biden's plan. Now I'm going to go more specifically into some of the different points that Biden has brought up on his website for the climate. So this is Biden's plan. We're going to start with the tackling the climate emergency, and as we go through it, we can see that he has a little video introduction and he talks about some of the major points that inspired his plan, including the Green New Deal, which he calls a crucial framework. And some of the points that he covers in this first part talk about some of the main parts of the Biden plan itself, which include talking about moving towards 100% clean energy economy and net zero emissions no later than 2050. He also talks about building a stronger, more resilient nation, though he's a little vague on that information, and rallying the rest of the world against the threat of climate change through international cooperation, and standing up to the abuse of power by polluters such as the oil industry, and fulfilling the obligation to the workers as they have supported our economy thus far. He then talks about his personal achievements in the area of climate, and then goes into what the effects of climate change will be on the United States, such as warming oceans, shrinking ice sheets, glacier retreat, sea level rise, and extreme weather events. And from there, we go on to Biden's day one unprecedented plan that he will enact on the first day, including protecting biodiversity by conserving 30% of American land and water by 2030. And in his legislation, he talks about wanting to start the ARPAC, which is basically a research association to figure out the best methods of moving towards a clean economy, and that includes, in his case, nuclear energy. So he talks about nuclear energy and biofuel and using those technologies in the most efficient manner to help us move towards a clean energy economy. He discusses talking about protecting urban areas from effects of climate change, working towards more sustainable agricultural practices, as well as the jobs that will be created through this environmentally friendly economic revolution. He also stresses the spark of a second Great Railroad Revolution, which I find really interesting, and I'm sure that Amtrak is very excited about that, and the importance of public transportation in general. He also talks about how climate change is a international threat and that they will rejoin the Paris Climate Accord and make it a more serious agreement, including specifically talking with China and their movement towards clean energy, since that is the larger carbon emitter in the world. And he will continue to talk about in this plan land use management, biodiversity, clean water, and how climate change is a core national security threat in all. And he discusses further on why he finds that that is the case, including sea level rise and melting permafrost. He also talks about holding institutions that have polluted in the past accountable and also protecting the water systems of different areas. He goes in depth on each location of the United States and what it would individually. Again, he stresses the importance of a just transition for those who work in the fossil fuel industry currently so that they're not just put out of work. Okay, now we're going to talk about the clean energy part of the plan, and at first a lot of it is repetition from the previous part that we looked at. However, some elements that are important to note is we talk about the auto industry, the transit system, the power sector, buildings, housing, and social justice and agricultural and conservation elements of his plan a little more detailed. In addition to that, he specifically stresses the need for American-made products and to kind of create our own economy around this opportunity of renewable energy. He continues to talk further about making this America first, and he's actually quite patriotic in his approach on the overall climate plan. He plans on creating standards for utilities and grid operators for making sure that everything is consistent, and he wants to create 1 million jobs, upgrading 4 million buildings, and weathering an extra 2 million buildings to keep infrastructure up to date. In addition to that, he also wants to support research through an advanced research projects agency on climate. And he really does emphasize the importance of creating a coalition around the issue through a civilian's climate corps. I don't know what that means, but it sounds kind of cool. And he wants to help farmers and ranchers be able to change to a more environmentally friendly method of doing things, and focusing more on underappreciated areas, he plans on creating a climate and economics justice screening tool so that people are able to access information about their areas better. Okay, so it's moving a little fast, but now we're getting in more into the environmental justice section. We're talking about the establishment of an environmental and climate justice division within the U.S. Department of Justice, further recognizing that environmental racism issues are a real problem that need to be faced. He's taking a line from some Congress people, some government people, some researchers. In this case, we're referring to an app presented by a congresswoman to let people know whether or not there's any environmental hazards in their area. I highly recommend you check out this climate plan more on your own. I hope you found this informative. Did I miss anything? Please leave the comments below. Let me know what you think of Biden's climate plan. Is it enough? Is it ambitious enough? Is it too ambitious? Please let me know. I hope this video is useful. We will find out in a day whether or not this video was worth making in the first place. But as a reminder, please get out and vote because election day is tomorrow. And make sure to talk about the climate every day and support your local news. As I am a journalist, so that is another thing that I am going to add on as an action point, is support your local news. That being said, please make sure you join me on Thursday for the Climate Book Club. We are discussing chapters 12 through 16 of the current book we're reading, which is Don't Even Think About It by George Marshall. More information about that in the description below. So please make sure you join me for the Climate Book Club meeting, which is a live stream event happening at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And then on Monday, we are going to, actually I don't know what we're talking about yet on Monday. If you have any suggestions on what you would like me to talk about on Monday, please let me know. And without further ado, thank you for coming, and I will see you all next week. Bye!